The National Institute of Drug Abuse conducted a research study in 2019 and came to the conclusion that more than 70,000 Americans had died um, due to opioid related overdoses. Did you know that one person dies every 8 minutes due to opioid addictions? Today, I'm going to be talking about the history of opioids and how they were and are used today, how it works in the body and the effects it can have on it, and the withdrawal symptoms that a person might face while they are trying to quit their addiction, as well as the medication that is available to them um, in the event of a addiction or overdose. So opioids really stem back from about 3,000 years ago in ancient Egypt, where they first used opium, which is an extract from the opium poppy plant, in medicinal remedies, while at the same time in the Mediterranean, the Minoans were using that same extract for its potential to get them high. So even though opioids were known from way long ago, it wasn't until the 19th century where they began to experiment with it, and they found a chemical compound known as morphine. They identified it and did research on it and created opiates, which were known as morphine and codeine. So in the 20th century, many big drug companies like Purdue Pharma did more research on this opiate, and produced chemical strains that were very similar to them, that were later known as hydrocodone, oxycodone, fentanyl, and heroin. In the 1980s and 90s, prescription painkillers began to rise to abnormal heights because these drug companies were influencing these prescribers and these patients to buy and consume these painkillers without telling them about the potential side effects and the potential for abuse and misuse of this drug. And that's really what created the opioid crisis and all the deaths that came along with it. So, even though chemically all opioids are different, they all aim for the same thing. So, these are opioid receptors in the brain. And what happens is the body naturally produces endorphins in order to bind to these opioid receptors and be able to manage pain. And they also produce a feeling of happiness and euphoria. So that's why they're known also as the feel-good chemical. But what happens is when people start taking opioids, these opioids are able to bond with these opioid transmitters better and for longer periods of time. And when they do that, the body naturally produces dopamine, which is which has been known to be the reason that people associate their high with feelings of happiness and euphoria. So the opioids also affect the body in a way that they affect the production of noradrenaline, which are basically little helpers that help the body and its processes, such as maintaining blood pressure, digestion, heart rate, and they affect it because they start slowing down the process. So what happens is that after a long time of taking opiates, the body starts to build a resistance to them, and the opiate can no longer bond as easily to that neurotransmitter. And it also tries to remove as many opioid transmitters and receptors as it possibly can in order to prevent the effects of the opioid on it. But people try to compensate for this resistance that is being built by taking even more of the substance, causing the body an enormous amount of strain. And this even further affects the production of noradrenaline. So once this production of noradrenaline has reached a maximum, the body tries to create new noradrenaline receptors that are now independent to the opioid. So they are dependent on the opioid to tell them how much of the noradrenaline that they need to produce, because the body has become unsensitized to how much it is in the body at one time. So once this happens, a person trying to get over their addiction removes the opioid, and the body starts producing an enormous amount of noradrenaline. And it does not know what to do with all of that excess noradrenaline that is being produced. So it does take time, but it does eventually get rid of it. But in that meantime, that's when people start to feel all of the effects of withdrawal. So they start feeling the fever, chills, headaches, body cramps, abdominal cramps, and the irritability. They start feeling all of this because the body is trying to get rid of all of this noradrenaline. The only drugs that are available right now to help combat it are naloxone, which binds to the receptors and prevents further acceptance of the substance, and can also destroy the substance in order to prevent an overdose from happening, as well as metadone and buprenorphine, which these are more like maintenance drugs in order to prevent people from overdosing in future times. So opioid addiction is preventable and treatable if it does get to the point of being a large addiction. But even with all of that help there, the National Institute for Drug Abuse has stated that people do need to do their part in finding help and support from people in order to get better. Because if they don't do that, then there will be no solution for the problem that has been caused. Thank you.